Okay, so Ajahn Brahmali is not here yet, so we're going to use the time and share from our groups. So our group, I don't think anyone disagreed that Samatha and Vipassana ought to go together. Everybody agreed upon that. And one of the interesting things I think people found from this class today is that Samatha and Vipassana are results that come from practice. They are not an activity that has to be done by us. Rather, they are qualities or a state of mind that arises naturally through what we have been doing before. I think that was one of the interesting things that came out in our group. Can anyone think of anything else that popped up in our group, people that were in our group, that I'm forgetting? No? Okay. I think that was basically it.
Hello. I think our group was unanimous in agreeing with Ajahn Brahmali. Sort of some people more just through a theoretical understanding. They thought the argument was quite convincing that samatha and vipassana are paired together, or maybe not the same thing, but are arising at about the same time. We did have one sort of somewhat unanswered question just about whether, you can correct me if I get this a little bit wrong, but whether insights that arise from, well, insights may be the wrong word, but understandings arise in perhaps everyday life about how you've acted in certain situations where you reflect wisely upon that and have perhaps a little bit of an understanding of not self, that you don't control what you didn't control what was going on and you couldn't control it, it was conditions arising. So whether that counts as vipassana, some sort of semi-insight.
Fortunately, all three groups are in agreement. They, specifically in our group, thanked Ajahn Brahmali that it become clear for the first time to a number of people how samatha and vipassana come together. Some nice analogies in our group. The mind was a dirty house and you needed samatha and vipassana to clean it up bit by bit. And the other observation to share that came from a number of people was when they were in meditation, they got a sense sometimes that samatha was in primary position and other times insight. So they were juggling, they were changing position during the meditation. But a really good session. Thank you to everybody. You don't need that.
So thanks the monks and nuns for doing the breakout session. That was really helpful. I just want to make a quick announcement before Ajahn Brahmali continues with the lesson. This is an announcement that we've just installed our donation station at the back of the hall or the front of the hall. So you can see there's a panel there and there's like designated amounts. I think it's $10, $20, $50 or something. Yeah, okay. So that is very easy. Just take out your card and just tag. And you will see this, it has, like if you go to Dhammasara has that for quite a long time. Bodhiana has got that installed as well. And then we did a trial during Katina in Jana Grove. And it was easy. You don't need cash. Just take out your card and tag. Okay, so if anyone wants to try and see if it works, you can do it at the end of the workshop. Okay, Ajahn, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, very good. So, is there anything I need to know about the proceedings of the last half an hour? Yeah. Okay, I'm not sure if I need to know that, but anyway, that's good, that's right. Okay, good, well done. Okay, so let's continue where we left off. And I think we have kind of established fairly strongly, according to the sutras, that samatha and vipassana really go together. It seems to be, it's a kind of common theme, and it's something that you hear if you listen to various teachers around the world. You know, it's one of the famous saying of Ajahn Chah, Ajahn Brahm's teacher. He would always say that samatha vipassana are like a knife. One side is samatha, the other side is vipassana. You can't just have one-sided knife. Maybe in Zen Buddhism we can have a one-sided knife, but not in Theravada Buddhism. Yeah, there's no such thing. In Zen Buddhism we can have all kind of weird things, but not in Theravada Buddhism. So two-sided knives, yeah, samatha vipassana going together. Yeah? And so I think that this is not just Ajahn Chah's idea or anyone's ideas. It's actually quite firmly and solidly based from the suttas. So to take this a bit further, we need to ask why that is the case. If we can understand the why, then it becomes even more solid, our understanding of this combination of samatha and vipassana. So why is it that they develop together? This is the question I put up there. And if we can answer that, and we can understand kind of how these things work, it's always useful to understand how things work. If you understand how something works, it becomes a very strong understanding of something. So let's have a look at this. So one of the important points that you find in the suttas is this idea that the 5 hindrances, these are basically defilements of the mind. When we talk about defilements, we mean something that kind of dirties the mind, if you like. They are the fuel for delusion. And delusion is avidya. The opposite of avidya is vidya. Vidya is like insight, One of the translations of vidya is insight, very closely related to vipassana. So if the hindrances are the fuel of delusion, they take you away from vipassana. The delusion and vipassana are almost opposite ends of a spectrum. One is seeing clearly, the other one is the opposite of seeing clearly. Delusion is kind of blindness, darkness, and all of these kind of things. So the hindrances fuel delusion. This is a sutta which shows that very nicely, which I really like. What is the fuel for this delusion or ignorance or avidya? And you should say the 5 hindrances, straight, very kind of clear. This is from the Anguttara Nikaya Tens, number 61. So if ignorance is the fuel of delusion, it means, if the hindrances are the fuel of ignorance and delusion, it means that if you reduce the hindrances, you have less delusion, you have less ignorance. So a reduction in the hindrances, a reduction in the defilements of the mind means more clarity, more clear seeing, less of the darkness and the problems of the mind. So there is a relationship between vipassana and hindrances. More hindrances, less vipassana. Less hindrances, more vipassana is the obvious relationship here. But the point is that the hindrances are also related to samatha and samadhi in exactly the same way. The more hindrances you have, the less calm you are, right? Isn't that kind of obvious? If you have lots of hindrances in the mind, a lot of desires and ill will, the mind is all over the place, thinking about the future, thinking about the past. If you're very restless, obviously it's the opposite of samatha and samadhi. So obviously the hindrances are also opposed to samatha and samadhi. The more hindrances you have, the less samatha you have. The less hindrances you have, you tend to have more samatha. And this can be shown. This is actually exactly the same sutta. So when you have the 3 kinds of misconduct, and this is just misconduct by body, speech, and mind, the tini tu charitani in Pali, then you have 5 hindrances. And when you have the 5 hindrances, then you have delusion. This is just what I was talking about now, from the same sutta, Anguttara Nikaya 1061. And then you have the reverse sequence, where we start with the 3 kinds of good conduct. 3 kinds of good conduct. What do they lead to? They lead to the 4 applications of mindfulness, is what we're talking about here. 4 applications of mindfulness, then move on to the 7 factors of awakening. And that then takes you to knowledge and liberation. So what you see here is the 4 applications of mindfulness, the 7 factors of awakening. Well, this is meditation practice in the suttas. And you can see here, meditation practice is opposed to the 5 hindrances, right? The more you have of the 5 hindrances, the worse is your meditation. The less samatha you have. This 7 factors of awakening take you to samadhi. The less samatha you have. Reduce the 5 hindrances, the the better your meditation is, the more peaceful you're going to be, the more calm you're going to be, the more you're going to develop the 7 factors of awakening here. Just to make that even more clear, I'll just show you this next. Here we see it even more clearly. The 5 hindrances are opposed to the calm of the mind that comes from meditation practice. They are opposites of each other. So this leads us to the obvious conclusion. And that is that the 5 hindrances are a hinder. The hindrances are a hinder. I'm not sure how well said that is, but anyway, the hindrances are a hinder. They stop, they block both samatha and vipassana, both calm and clear seeing. And so what this means is that the cause of the problem is the same for samatha, for vipassana. The solution is the same. You have to reduce the hindrances. When you reduce the hindrances, you have both more samatha and both vipassana. And this is why they have to go together, because they have the same cause. They have the same reason for their absence and the same reasons for their presence. And when you reflect on this, you can, it's useful to maybe to reflect on this a little bit further. What do we mean when we say that the hindrances are opposed to vipassana, clear seeing? I should have talked about that a little bit more, actually. And when the hindrances are strong, let's say you desire something, now that desire is going to block your ability to be clear about the thing you're watching. If you're watching something and you have desire for it, that desire means you already have a kind of a distorted outlook. You already want that thing. The only way you're going to see something clearly if your mind is equanimous. You're seeing it for what it is without having any distortion of the mind, which attracts you to it or repels you from that object. If you are attracted or repelled by something, if you have aversion or desire, it is already a vested interest in that object already. So it's obvious that if you're going to see something clearly, you have to have a degree of equanimity. You have to have a neutral stance, and then you can watch it with that neutrality of the mind. Then you can see things clearly. The stronger your desire, the stronger the aversion that you may have in relation to any object or anything in the world, the more your mind is distorted. It's kind of obvious when you think about it. And of course, exactly the same thing with samatha, as I just mentioned before. Desire is a restlessness of the mind. Desire is an agitation of the mind. It's a movement towards something. It's the opposite of peace and calm. So obviously the hindrances are a problem for both of these. It's kind of something that gets in the way. Reduce the hindrances, both samatha and vipassana will increase. And the other way around. And of course the whole purpose of the Buddhist path is a gradual reduction of the defilements. That is the purpose of the Buddhist path, which means a reduction of the hindrances. We see this in a number of suttas where the Buddha talks about, first of all, we reduce the coarser hindrances, the coarser defilements of the mind. Then we reduce the middling defilements, then the refined defilements, and the super-duper refined defilements, all the way till the mind is completely pure, like a kind of a white cloth. There's nothing left, no stains left in that mind. There's a gradual reduction in this is kind of the purpose of the path. So because there is a gradual reduction in the hindrances, there's a gradual improvement in samatha and vipassana, because this is exactly what stops these things from arising. It makes good sense, right? Does anyone disagree with this? Is there anyone who disagrees? Do you dare to say that you disagree? To me, it makes such good sense. So if you disagree, I would be really interested in hearing from you. Because this is it really fits very well with it integrates very well with our understanding of the Dhamma, and it kind of fits really well. So just to recap again, when the hindrances increase, samatha and vipassana decline, because they both come from that source. When the hindrances decrease, both samatha and vipassana improve as a consequence. The whole path is a gradual improvement of samatha and vipassana, calm and clear seeing. The two always go together. So this is the main kind of understanding. This is kind of main line. And there's more to it, unfortunately. Things are never quite as simple as they appear. But I just want to stop there for a minute because now I'm going to move on to slightly kind of look at things in a slightly different way here. So, any comments about this? Yeah, you agree? So you okay? No comment. Okay, I'm great. I must have convinced you completely here. My cunning plan has worked. Yeah. No, it's actually, this is pretty much, as far as I'm concerned, from the suttas. So it's not a very cunning plan. Yes, please. Okay, go for it.
Just
then.
got a comment.
Yeah.
A question.
Yeah.
So, because we desire the outcomes which Buddha talks about,
Yeah.
we have to put effort. So our desire to come to meditation, to practice what he says is there, and that's wholesome.
Mm.
So when you sit down and then something arises in your mind which you think is something good,
Yeah.
how do you not get excited or fearful? Because my mind is moving, wanting it, or fearful and pulling back. So is there anything that you could share with us to help us to remain calm?
Yes. Well, you get excited about it because it's kind of desirable. Is that what you mean? Something desirable, you get excited about it. You just have to remember that almost all of those things that we desire about the future, they never really give the satisfaction that we think they will give. This is one of the things. Yeah, remember that. Remember that you have been desiring things like that for eons already. And it's still here. Yeah, still kind of waiting to kind of get our act together. Yeah. It doesn't really get you anywhere. This kind of desires in the world are just eternal merry-go-round, just go round and round and round. Yeah, they never really bring the satisfaction they promise. And then you keep on craving, keep on desiring. It doesn't, without actually taking you anywhere. The thing that takes you somewhere is the peace and happiness in the present moment. You just need to reflect on the downsides of the ordinary world again and again. And as you do that, the mind starts to incline in a different direction. Yeah, this is really the trick. Yeah. More coffee. Okay. If I die from too much coffee, please give me a nice burial. I can say we have it.
While you take a sip of your coffee, Ajahn,
Yeah.
I'll just read this question out.
Please. Yeah.
Bhante, can we say that both samatha and vipassana are qualities that bring about jhanas, right? Samadhi? Oh.
Yes, you can say that. Yep, that is correct. So both samatha and vipassana go together. They are just what happens as you practice the path. And as you practice the path, as these things get more powerful, eventually you also get to the jhanas. Yeah. So this is it's all same of the. It's kind of, this is what is so interesting about this, is that more vipassana leads to more samatha leads to vipassana. So together they all bring you towards samma samadhi. That's kind of part of the point of this. Yeah? Samma sati going to samma samadhi. Yeah? Practice these things, they actually lead you to the jhanas eventually. Yeah? So vipassana leads to jhana, yeah, which is interesting. Usually we think vipassana leads to insight. It also leads to jhana. Jhana is a kind of insight. In the sutras, jhana is called jnanadassana. It's called alangarya nanadassana visesa, which means a distinction in knowledge and vision that is worthy of the noble ones. Yeah, so jhana is a distinction in knowledge and vision. Because a jhana brings with it, and it comes from profound insight into the nature of reality. You cannot attain a jhana without abandoning a large part of the world as we know it. And that abandonment requires insight into the world. So jhana and insight and jhana, they go together. And this idea that you can have jhana without any wisdom, it's false. Yeah? A lot of wisdom comes with the jhana experiences. Not complete wisdom, but it takes you a long way on the path. So, we have looked at how these things always go together. Now, yet samatha and vipassana are also conditioned by other factors. Yeah? The 5 hindrances is not everything that conditions samatha and vipassana. And now I'm finally getting back to the question that you had, Robin, last time. So I haven't forgotten about you. You're still there. So we're going to look at, well, what are these other conditioning factors? And maybe this picture needs to be nuanced a little bit, yeah? The idea that we need to take into account more than just the idea of the 5 hindrances. So let's just do 5 minutes of meditation before we get into that, just to get a bit of peace, and then we'll carry on. Okay. So, I suppose we can just carry on. Is there any last question before we continue? Move on. We already had some questions already, but just in case. Anything outside Lehar?
I think you've answered it. This person asks, is it correct to say that samatha and vipassana are two sides of the same coin?
Yeah, same side, two sides
Same
of the same
coin,
knife, same
same
coin,
hand,
same
same
hand,
knife.
same. Yeah.
And then there's one last question from Eddie, but he's from Indonesia.
Yeah.
What to do when meditation seems stuck? We keep having past and future thoughts. What method can we use to support our meditation? Does this have to do with letting go? If so, how?
Yeah, it has to do with letting go, exactly. So you just have to remember that the past and the future are not all that interesting. As I said yesterday, the future usually just means more of the same, especially if you think about worldly things. Of course, if you dream about jhana, you're okay, but very few people dream about jhana in their fantasies. Yeah, it's more about, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, do that, problems to solve. Those problems, all those worldly thoughts, there's no end to them. There's no solution. There's nowhere to really go. It's just more of the same, more of the same. Just get rid of it straight away. It's not going to take you anywhere. And the same thing with the past. Yeah, the past really is there just for us to forgive and let go. So forgive the past. We all had our times when we have had kind of, people, we have had kind of a disagreements or whatever. That's just a human condition that sometimes we have disagreements. Let it go, let it be. Forgive. Yeah, they are doing their best, you are doing your best. There's no need to kind of hold on to those things. So that's what it means to let go. But to be able to be let go, you have to first of all reflect in a useful way. That is very supportive for allowing the letting go to happen. Yes, please, Prem. Yeah. Oh.
I wanted to ask in the morning actually, but didn't get the chance. When we were talking about the Abhidhamma and the influence from the Burmese meditation teachers, etc., particularly to the Theravada Buddhism in Sri Lanka, what was the impact of the Visuddhimagga brought by Venerable Buddhaghosa? And they did not talk about samatha, vipassana, etc., but also they had this kasina bhavana in that. But they did talk about jhanas, isn't it?
Yeah, talk about jhanas as well. Yeah, jhana based on the kasina bhavana, the earth kasina. Yeah.
And that is when the Theravada tradition got scripted first. Yes.
Sorry, what was that?
That is when the Dhamma got written.
Oh, it got written long before that.
Long before that.
Apparently, according to the tradition, they got written in the Alu Vihara in Sri Lanka in the first century BC, and whereas the Visuddhimagga comes from 5th century AD. So there's quite a long distance between the two. Yeah,
sure.
500 years or something. Yeah.
So at that time there was no influence on this
Abhidhamma.
Not the Abhidhamma. Abhidhamma came first, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah. There was, the Abhidhamma was very influential on the Visuddhimagga. The Visuddhimagga uses Abhidhamma terminology, and one of the things that you find in the Visuddhimagga, which is very important there, is the Vipassana jnanas, the Vipassana knowledges. And the Visuddhimagga, it has, how many, 16 Vipassana, something like that? There's a whole sequence of Vipassana, and that comes largely from the Abhidhamma, especially the Patisambhida Magga. Patisambhida Magga is one of the books of the Khuddaka Nikaya, and it's basically like an Abhidhamma. It's an extension of the Abhidhamma in a sense, has kind of Abhidhamma methodology. So the Visuddhimagga is an understanding of the suttas through the lens of the Abhidhamma. So it is Abhidhamma is certainly part of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so let us carry on. And now we're going to talk about do samatha and vipassana always go together? Are there exceptions to the things that we have been talking about? And I'm now going to look at those suttas that were briefly mentioned by Robin just last week, because we need to explain these kind of apparent exceptions. How do they actually fit in with the larger picture? And the first sutta I'm going to look at is a sutta we have already looked at in quite in detail already, and I just want to briefly just touch on that once more, and just to see how we can actually account for this properly. Yeah. So here is a person who has calm, but not clear seeing. So this seems to be saying that it is possible to develop calm without clear seeing, right? This is kind of the message that you're getting here. Yeah. So how do we explain this idea that you can have calm, you can have samatha without vipassana? How does that make any sense? Because if you develop them together, that is kind of the question we have to answer. Yeah, so this is what we said before. You should approach someone who has that clear seeing, the discernment, and you should ask them all of these questions, yeah, how to see things, etc. And then, as you do that, they will explain, and then after some time, you gain both calm and clear seeing. So how do we understand this? And the way to understand this is to understand very specifically what is meant by calm and clear seeing in the sutta. They're asking here about how phenomena should be seen. And when you talk about how sankharas should be understood, then the idea here, and if you understand also how calm is defined in these suttas, we're talking about very high levels of calm and insight. So this seems to be someone who has jhanas already. Yeah, they already have the jhana states, because that is how the calm is defined. We looked at that before, ekodi bhava, these kind of things, this kind of terminology being used there. So they have the jhanas, but they're not yet stream enters. Yeah? So this is someone who already have a lot of calm, they already have a lot of vipassana as well, but they haven't got the full vipassana that leads to stream entry. It's that last little thing that they are missing. So there's a slight, you can argue, a slight imbalance in their two faculties. One faculty is slightly stronger than the other one. But that does not mean that the calm does not bring with it clear seeing. It brings with it clear seeing, but maybe not the full clear seeing. There's a slight imbalance between the two. So this is how to understand this, is to understand that even though they grow together, they can grow together in slightly different ways. One can have a slight preference for the other, and the other can have a slight preference for the first one. So they kind of are slightly in imbalance. Yeah, that makes sense. So they grow together, but they are not, because we are different people, we have different strengths, different qualities as people or whatever, these things do not grow in exactly the same way. One person may have a little bit of one, and another one a little bit more of the other. And depending on other faculties that we have. So it needs to be understood in that kind of relative context. That's the only way we can really square the sutta with with what I said before, that they grow together. I just remind you that clear seeing here, I should have written in what the Pali word for clear seeing is in this case, because it's not exactly vipassana, it is adipanya dhamma vipassana. Adipanya dhamma, which means like qualities relating to the higher wisdom. Yeah? And the higher wisdom is always defined as stream entry in the suttas. So this is quite clearly meant here. What is meant is vipassana into the wisdom which leads to stream entry here. Adipanya dhamma vipassana. I don't know if you remember that term. We had a look at it before when we went through this last time. And then the calm side is then defined in terms of the jhana state, ekodibhava, and the samadhati, the verb, which means to still the mind. Yeah, so this is how I would explain this. So if we are going to, like it says here, if we are going to use reflection, if we are going to reflect on the Dhamma, samadhi has already been attained, or we have a degree of samadhi, and we're going to focus on understanding things properly, or we may not have any samadhi and we just want to use reflections instead. So we're kind of focusing, if you like, on the vipassana, we're focusing on the reflection side. If we reflect wisely, it will give rise to a degree of clear seeing, which will bring the calm with it, like I was saying before. Or we can focus on the calm side of things. And that calm side of things, when we meditate on the breath or whatever, will bring vipassana with it. There's like one, focusing on one, but it brings the other quality with it. And the sutras are full of these kind of reflections. Yeah. So how can we use these kind of reflections in a way to support the practice, whether before we have stillness of the mind or after we have stillness of the mind? In both cases, you can use reflection, or underway while you're practicing it. So these are some of these ideas. So remember when we talked about vipassana, we defined it as seeing the mind and body, seeing the 5 khandhas, the 5 constituents of personality, seeing the 3 characteristics, seeing them in terms of that. Anicca, dukkha, anatta. Impermanence, suffering, non-self. Yeah? So this is what it means. And the interesting thing is that when you read the sutras, there are lots of these kind of reflections in the sutras, focusing on these 3 characteristics. And that is when we kind of develop vipassana that brings samadhi or brings calm with it. It's a focus on one, bringing the other with it. So here are some examples. Yeah. Developing discernment is called developing perceptions in the sutras. We are developing perceptions. It's a ways of looking at the world. That's what they call developing perceptions. So here are some examples. The asubha sanya. You've probably heard of this. This is a very common thing that you talked about in Buddhism. Perception of impurity or of non-beauty. And the way this is explained in the sutras is the perception, is the contemplation or perception of the 31 parts of the body. Yeah, this is known as the asubha sanya, focusing on the aspects of the body that are not beautiful. Yeah, the inner parts of the body. Yeah, all the various organs and skeletons and all of these kind of things. That is the asubha sanya. So what is that? Well, it is focusing on the non-beautiful. It is not focusing on the sukha, the happy aspect of the body, but more on the kind of the dukkha aspect. The asubha can be considered maybe a part of the dukkha aspect of the body, which is not interesting. Or you can say that asubha is like a 4th quality. You have anicca, impermanence, you have dukkha, you have non-self, and you have asubha as like a 4th quality of what is, of the 4th characteristic, if you like, of phenomena. So this is focusing on that vipassana aspect, because you are seeing the downside, the problem with the body, with the 5 khandhas. That is the vipassana aspect. But if you focus on the 31 parts of the body, if you remember what this body looks like when you peel the skin off, the only reason why we look the way we do is because we have skin. Without skin, we don't look the same. Have you ever considered what you look like without skin? It's interesting, right? I should be very glad we have the skin, because otherwise it would, it wouldn't be the wouldn't be the same. The skin kind of hides the reality behind it. So, as they say, beauty is only skin deep. It's true in a literal sense. Yeah, beauty is only skin deep. Take the skin off, and I don't know if you remember when we had that last conference on Buddhism down in the exhibition center in Perth and the conference center, and they had remember that German doctor, some kind of crazy German doctor, and he actually peeled the skin off human body, so you can see the human body behind the skin. And did anyone of you go there and see that when you were there? And it's kind of fascinating. Yeah, once you see that, you realize the human body is actually quite. Take the skin off, things look quite different suddenly. And so that is a very fascinating kind of reality. But we all only see what is skin deep, usually. So what happens is when we do this kind of asubha sanya, we lose some of the attraction and attachment to the body, because you realize the body actually isn't all that interesting after all. The reality is much more not as interesting. And of course, when you lose interest to the body, it means that your defilements go down. When your defilements go down, it means you become more peaceful and calm. Yeah? And this is why you find this kind of contemplation in the Satipatthana Sutta. It's right there. This is Satipatthana practice we're talking about now. You're contemplating the body. It is a kind of vipassana because you're seeing the downside of things. Yeah, you're focusing on the characteristics of the body. But obviously, it leads to samatha, because when you see the negative aspect of the body, you lose the attraction, the craving, the attachment, and you become more peaceful as a consequence. Samatha, vipassana going together. Yeah? This is using reflection to give rise to both calm and clear seeing at the same time. Next one. Perception of death. Yeah? Maranasanya. So what is the perception of death? Or it's also called maranasati, the recollection of death. Well, what it is basically just you imagine the idea of dying for yourself. Usually it is about ourselves. Yeah, when you die, what is that? Well, dying is a time of great impermanence. Yeah, because you have to give up pretty much everything that you think you are entitled to in this world, everything you hold on to, including your body, everything you own, all your relationships, everything has to go. So it's a big time of impermanence. In a sense, you can argue that all the impermanence in our life is almost like comes together at the time of death and becomes a big moment of impermanence. Everything has to go. So it's a very powerful point of seeing into the nature of the three characteristics. Yeah, this is what we're seeing: a perception of death, focusing on the three characteristics. Because it is so impermanent, it is also going to be dukkha. It's going to be suffering because you have to let go, and letting go is always difficult. And it's anatta because you have no control over it. You just have to let it go, have to let it be. All of these things will just have to disappear on their own. So death contemplation brings with it the clear seeing of the three characteristics. Not fully, not all the way to the full depth, but at least partially. It takes you a long way. Maranasanya. What happens when you do that? You become peaceful. You become peaceful because you hold less on to the things of the world. If you know you're about to die, it's crazy to hold on to the things of the world. You know you have to let go, and because you let go, because you have less craving and desire, less attachments for all the things in the world, you become peaceful. Yeah? Vipassana, clarity about things, seeing things in the right way, leading to samatha, the two going together. Yeah, so reflection leading to samatha, samatha leading to reflection. These two, you can see here how powerfully combined they are, in this way here. Perception of being fed up with the entire world. That's my translation, by the way. No one else came up with that one. Fed up. Dhammaloka anabhirati. So this is another one. This is the idea that you look at the world at large and you see how the world is always changing, how things are out of control, how nothing really is. You don't know where the world is going to go. You don't know when the next war is going to come. You don't know whether what's happening, or whether we're going to all burn up because of climate change or whatever. It's kind of all so uncertain, and you just shrug your shoulders. I'm fed up with that world. It's just who knows what's going to go next. I'm not going to take any interest in it anymore. I'm just going to let it go its own course. I'll do my best to be kind, to be caring, to do the right thing, but I'm not going to hold on to something which is so unreliable. So this is like the idea of being fed up with the whole thing, just letting go of the whole thing. It's a kind of vipassana, or a kind of clear seeing, because you're looking at impermanence. Things are out of control. You can't control them. There's 7 billion, or how many is it now? 8 almost. How many people are we in this planet? A lot, anyway. Somewhere, too many probably. Somewhere between 7 and 8 billion people, and you are one. Well, your chances of having much influence is pretty small, right? So we you see that, and then the anicca sanya, and if you hold on to these things, you're going to suffer, because the world is not going to go where you want it to go. Out of control, anatta, etc. Insight, clear seeing rather, you become peaceful because you let go again. Perception of impermanence, this is all kind of related to the previous things. But the idea of impermanence, especially here, relates to the 5 khandhas usually. Your person, seeing the unreliability of the 5 aspects of your personality, how they're always changing, how you can't control anything, how things are always out of reach, And that makes you understand dukkha. You have the anicca dukkha sanya, the perception of suffering in what is impermanent. You have the dukkha anatta sanya, the perception of non-self in what is suffering. And these things going together. And of course, again, it leads to calm and peace when you do these kind of reflections in the right way. So for this reason, these reflections, in a sense, are strong, are a vipassana way. This is kind of the vipassana way in the suttas, reflecting on things in the right way. And they're called sannyas. And if you do them in the right way, they will have this very beneficial effect, both in terms of clear seeing and also in terms of calming the mind. So this is how the suttas tend to explain vipassana, as I see it. And there is more to it, of course, and you can imagine that these reflections will be more powerful if you do some meditation with them. So if you sit down and watch the breath and then you do this kind of reflections, will be much more powerful, because then you will have more, the mind will be more peaceful. These reflections will have more power, so you will see more clearly, which will lead to more peace, which will lead to seeing more clearly, which will lead to more peace. Dung, 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 and you're kind of moving towards the, towards the purpose of this whole practice. So that is the idea here. And you will notice this is quite different from how the Vipassana meditation or Vipassana schools usually talk about Vipassana. Usually the way that the Vipassana schools talk about Vipassana is that you sit down and you watch the feelings in the body right here and now. You watch them coming, going, moving around from here to there, from back and forth. But there's very little textual support for that in the suttas. You can derive it as a certain interpretation of the Satipatthana Sutta, but it's far from clear that it is the best way of thinking about Satipatthana. In fact, I would say there are other ways of thinking about Satipatthana Sutta which are much more in line with how the Buddha talks about these things. If you want to talk about Vipassana, a kind of direct way of looking at things, it is these kind of reflections that you find in the suttas. And you find this in many, many, many places in the suttas. If you look at the numerical discourse of the Buddha, the Anguttara Nikaya, there's a large number of suttas that talk about developing perceptions. I've only mentioned 4 here, but there's a whole list of perceptions. I don't know how many there are altogether, 12 or 15 or something. All kind of things. They have what do they have? The Pana Sanya, the perception of abandoning, the Nirodha Sanya, the Viraga Sanya, the what else? Anyway, there's lots of them. And these are all they kind of focus on vipassana subjects, come down to anicca, dukkha, and anatta. That's what it comes down to. Okay, so let's carry on. Okay, that's a couple of suttas that have these perceptions in them. Anguttara 1060, that's the famous Girimananda Sutta, by the way, if you're not aware of that. It's a kind of well-known sutta, often chanted by people as a Paritta chant. So, we have not just looked at the person who has calm but not clear seeing, how we can develop more clear seeing, and now it's the opposite. This is the person who has clear seeing already but does not have calm. This is the other way around. So again, you can see there can be an imbalance. The imbalance can go both ways. Either you have more clear seeing and less calm, or you have more calm and less clear seeing. So then we have what we had before. They should approach someone. They should ask about how do you still things. And here again, it talks about jhanas really, because they're talking about things in a very profound sense. And then they tell them what to do. And then after some time, they have both. So again, there is an imbalance here. But it is a relative imbalance. It is not either one or the other. You still have a lot of both. It's just that there is a little bit more of one than there is of the other. Okay. How is everyone doing? Are you doing all right? Yeah. Okay. Good. Glad. So. Now we come to the specific sutta that you brought up, Robin. This is your sutta? Yeah, this is the one? Yeah. So this is the one. This is Anguttara 4 is 170, where Ananda talks about the 4 ways to reach awakening. Yeah. So you have. So this is one of the other suttas that talk about this slight imbalance in calm and clear seeing. Yeah. So this is how it goes. A monastic may develop calm as a forerunner to clear seeing. Yeah. I think the translation elsewhere was to develop calm before clear seeing, or something like that. But I think the quite literal translation is as a forerunner to clear seeing. Yeah. So the idea here, as I understand this, and if we're going to interpret it in line with the other suttas, is that you develop the calm. Yeah, you watch the breath, you become peaceful, and as you watch the breath, as you become peaceful, the clarity, the clear seeing comes with it. Yeah, you're focusing on the calming, because that's what the watching breath is. But as you become calm, and especially after your meditation, you have a lot of clear seeing, precisely because your mind is calm. The defilements have gone down. Yeah, that's what calm means. And for that reason, you also have more vipassana. So this is one way to understand this, is that the forerunner is samatha, the other one is vipassana. Another way to understand this is like what we're looking at in the previous sutta. Yeah, you develop calm, but your calm is kind of slightly ahead of the clear seeing. So there comes a point, even when you get to the jhanas, where then you kind of start to investigate deeply vipassana, and then so you can actually make the breakthrough to stream entry. Yeah. So 2 slightly different ways of thinking about calm and clear seeing, samatha and vipassana. Yeah, so a monastic, or anyone, not just a monastic, anyone may develop calm as a forerunner to clear seeing. Yeah. As they do so, the path is born in them. They cultivate, develop, and make much of it. Yeah, the path is born means that you become a stream enterer. That's what the path is born means. The path is something that the stream enterer has. Yeah, it becomes part of who you are when you are a stream enterer. The path is there, and then when the path has been born in you, when it becomes part of you, then you cultivate and develop that path, as a stream enterer, as a sotapanna. And by doing that, you give up the fetters and eliminate the underlying tendencies. You become an arahant as you practice that path that you have acquired as a stream enterer. So this is one way of doing it. Yeah, and then you have the opposite. Another monastic develops clear seeing as a forerunner to calm. Yeah, so you develop all of these perceptions, and calm kind of follows along. And then there may come a point when you have a lot of, you feel that you have vipassana is going quite well, but you need to kind of get that extra samatha that takes you all the way to the jhanas, that allows you to become a stream enterer. Yeah, so then you develop one as a forerunner to the other. Then, as you do so, again, the path is born in them. And then you have another monastic who develops calm and clear seeing in conjunction. So you have more of a balanced approach. You watch the breath to become peaceful, but you also contemplate the nature of the 5 khandhas and the nature of the world in terms of the 3 characteristics, and you build them up more in conjunction. It's not that imbalance isn't there; they are more balanced. And then, as you do that, you practice in this way, the path is born in them. Anguttara 4 is 170. There is a 4th way as well in the sutta, but I'm not going to discuss that because it is a bit obscure what that 4th way actually means. But check out the sutta on your own when you go back. So this is the idea of the 2 things not being fully balanced. Yeah, so it is generally true that samatha and vipassana develop together. It is also true that the relative strength of each will vary from person to person. Yeah? Why is that? Well, the following reason. And what is the painful practice with slow insight? Insight here is abhinya. It's when someone is ordinarily full of acute desire, ill will, and confusion. And these 5 faculties manifest in the person weakly: confidence, energy, mindfulness, stillness, and wisdom. Yeah, so the practice is called painful because you have a lot of defilements in the mind. That was what makes it painful. And the reason why it is slow is because the faculties that you have, they are weak. Yeah. So the point here is that the defilements are not the only quality that decides the progress you are making. The other factor which decides the progress you're making are the spiritual faculties you have. You can have strong spiritual faculties even though your defilements are quite strong. So you can have weak defilements, weak spiritual faculties, weak defilements, strong spiritual faculties, strong defilements, weak spiritual faculties, and strong defilements and strong spiritual faculties. So these spiritual faculties will also have a bearing on your progress, and they will vary from person to person. Some faculties will be stronger than others. So there's all of these other qualities that come into the equation when someone with samatha and vipassana. The hindrances, the defilements is the main thing, but there are other things as well. And these other things then is what gives rise to this imbalance between samatha and vipassana in a particular person. So this is the other one, the painful practice with swift understanding. It's when someone is ordinarily full of acute desire, ill will, and confusion, and these 5 faculties manifest in them strongly: confidence, energy, mindfulness, stillness, and wisdom. So again, you can see how you can have strong desires and ill will, and yet you can have mindfulness and stillness to some degree. Or you can have weak desire and ill will. Normally these things will block you from mindfulness and stillness. But I guess this is a person who, because of their wisdom or whatever, they're able to subdue those defilements temporarily. And then when they come out of that stillness, the kind of defilements come back again strongly. This is just to show you that there are all of these factors, and this is what makes it not, so, makes it more complicated, the picture. This means that the hindrances in samatha and vipassana are correlated differently for different people. Okay, let's do some more meditation together.
of awakening actions to be practiced to improve Satipatthana, and which are the results of the practice?
There are really all kind of results. What you want to do is you want to try to establish mindfulness first of all. And so the way to establish mindfulness is really, we know what that is. It's basically about allowing the mind to kind of settle down, let go of the past or the future, and come into the present moment. That is kind of the initial part. And one of the things that I've kind of made a big point out of during this course is the idea that mindfulness really arises from sila, from virtue, from kindness, from all the good qualities in a person. That's where it comes from. So to establish that mindfulness, which is the very first factor of the 7 factors of awakening, you need to do all the other things in the Noble Eightfold Path. But once mindfulness is established, the process of meditation is really an automatic one. It's about sitting back and allowing these qualities to arise in the mind. So mindfulness comes first. Okay, then you use maybe a little bit of your contemplations to be able to give rise to some happiness in that meditation, and then the joy and the mindfulness coming together becomes then the source for the whole arising of the other factors of awakening here. So most of this process, almost all of those 7 factors of awakening are just a process where you sit back, you watch, and you allow it to happen. And your job is really just to kind of get out of the way, as Ajahn Brahmali says, and allow the process to be happening without your interference.
Okay, there's another question on, is Asubha and Metta Bhavana Samatha or Vipassana meditation?
So, Metta and Asubha Bhavana. So, I already talked about Asubha already, and I said that Asubha is, you're focusing on the negative, so in that sense it is Vipassana, but of course it leads to calm. That's what I was saying before. Metta is, Metta is not really Vipassana, because when you do Metta, you're not seeing the nature of reality. So Metta is more like a samatha practice. But of course, once you become calm, peaceful, you will see more clearly. So in that sense, the calm leads to Vipassana. This is what I mean by these things are really, you can't really pull them apart. It's just that one is a forerunner for the other one. One brings the other one with it. Ananda, please.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ajahn.
Yeah.
Just to clarify a couple of things that I saw in previous slides.
Yeah.
I think it was in 4194. It said path born in them. As this happens, path born in them.
Right. Yeah.
So, and also connecting that to that, in the same sutta, I think it was that Pali word that you quoted, Adipanya Dhamma Vipassana. Adipanya Dhamma Vipassana. So, which means that the word Adi indicates that it is a higher level of Panya.
Usually,
so, does it mean that path is born in them means gradually things happen? Gradually you see, and then it culminates in this Adipanya Dhamma.
That's what it means.
Is that the way to look at it?
It's a gradual, and the way the path works is a gradual development, and then there is a flash. When you become a stream enter, there's a gradual development up to a point, and the last one is the insight, the bang. Wow. Bang. Okay, so it's both. It's both instantaneous and gradual. Okay, let's stop there, Lehar, because it's just too many questions, and I have much more to do, and we are running out of time, and let's just kind of do. Okay, so I'll go a little bit faster because we only have 45 minutes left. So again, Samatha Vipassana they do develop together. They're correlated, but the way they are correlated is slightly different for different people, depending on the other qualities of your mind. Are you happy with that, Robin? Does that make sense? Okay, great. I'm glad. Okay. So then we come to the idea of reducing the hindrances. So if the development of Samatha Vipassana both depend on reducing the hindrances, then this becomes the main task of the path, including meditation. This is what we tried. This is kind of what the path is about. That's why it is called the path of purification. The gradual reduction of the hindrances, gradually improving both samatha and vipassana, calm and clear seeing. This can be done in two ways. And so this is what we have been talking about. You can observe a meditation object, like the breath. And then the main aim is calm, but clear seeing comes along with that. When you observe the meditation object and you don't really allow the defilements to arise, the defilements because defilements only arise when you reflect on what is desirable. You reflect on the beauty of things in the world, or you reflect on the ugliness, then you get ill will. So by staying with a meditation object, you're actually gradually decreasing the defilements of the mind. Defilements go down, you become calm, clear seeing comes along with that calm. Or alternatively, you can contemplate and reflect, and there the main aim is clear seeing. Like those sannyas, those perceptions I talked about before, you reflect on those things, you try to see the world in a clearer way, and as you do that, the calm comes along with that. Why? Well, because you are seeing that there is nothing really worth holding on to in that world, and so you let go, and when you let go, the desire decreases, calm happens as a consequence. Vipassana and samatha, two sides of the same story. Whether you focus on a meditation object, or you do reflection and contemplation, leads towards the same thing. Which one of these you should do, you will have to find out for yourself. You have to sort of figure out how your mind works, what your main problems are, and then you decide which one to do at which time. Usually they work together in a nice way. Observing a meditation object is typically what happens in the first 12 steps of the Anapanasati Sutta. I don't know, we're not going to have too much of a look at that, but the Anapanasati Sutta is the sutta on mindfulness of breathing. It has 16 steps, and the first 12 are really focused on the idea of calming with vipassana coming along. Contemplating and reflecting is what happens in the last 4 of those 16 steps, because that is where you focus on anicca, viraga, nirodha, and patinissagga, impermanence, fading away, cessation, and letting go. So these are all about insight and about seeing things clearly. That's what comes there. So now you can, okay, I'll just carry on. We can comment more on this as we go along. I'm not sure what's coming next here. Okay, so how do we combine reflection and meditation? Meditation meaning the simple thing like watching the breath. Reflection meaning more a contemplation on the nature of existence. How can we combine this? And there's a few ways you can do that. So for example, if you're trying to give rise to sufficient mindfulness so that you can stay with the breath or whatever it is, then you can use reflection to clear the way. That was this question before about whether you should do death contemplation first or mindfulness of breathing or be calm first. Well, again, it depends on the situation. You may not be ready to watch the breath. It may be hard to calm down in that way. Then you can use reflection to clear the way. Okay, I'm going to die. I don't know when. Okay, what's the point of having all of these stupid thoughts in my mind? Okay, clear the way, become calm, then you can watch the breath. Another way to combine this is that when you are stuck in your meditation practice, very common feeling for people when they practice meditation is they kind of reach a certain plateau. And as you when you get stuck in your meditation and watching the breath, then there is some hindrance there which is in the way. So you can use reflection to overcome those hindrances, right? This is also part of the way how we can combine reflection and meditation in this way. Samatha leading vipassana, vipassana leading samatha. And then after deep meditation, then you use reflection to see the deep nature of reality, the yatha bhuta jnanadassana. And this is like the last way, and this is where the vipassana becomes very deep after the meditation. And all of these cases, vipassana and samatha are moving together, but your focus is focusing on one with the other one coming along all the way to the end of the path. Okay, so that is the kind of the main kind of discussion on samatha and vipassana, and then this whole idea of samatha vipassana, it becomes deeper and deeper, and a very deep aspect of that is the combination of Satipatthana and samadhi. Yeah, Satipatthana practice and samadhi, because Satipatthana is about both samatha and vipassana. We need to also understand a bit about the connection between this samatha and vipassana and the achievement of samadhi. And I just want to show you how the suttas treat this, that there actually is a close connection between these things in the suttas. And just to give you some ideas of how this is spelled out in the suttas. Satipatthana practice, samadhi. We have seen before how samma sati leads to samma samadhi. Yeah? Samma sati is satipatthana, how the right mindfulness leads to right samadhi. And I just want to bring that out a little bit more in how it is explained in the suttas. So this is a sutta from the Anguttara Nikaya 8, and the Buddha says you should train like this. I will meditate observing an aspect of the body, and then feelings, mind, mental qualities, keen, aware and mindful, rid of desire and aversion for the world. That is how you should train. Yeah, this is the standard formula for Satipatthana. What we're dealing here with is Satipatthana practice. Yeah, and then what comes next? Well, this is what comes next. When this stillness, this samadhi, is developed and cultivated in this way, you should develop it with movement of the mind, without movement of the mind, with rapture, with bliss, with equanimity. And what is interesting about this is that it calls this stillness refers to the Satipatthana just before. It is talking about Satipatthana as a kind of samadhi. Yeah? So if you practice Satipatthana in the right way, it is actually called a kind of samadhi. It's not yet the full samadhi of the jhanas, but it's a samadhi which is leaning towards the jhanas. It is a stillness of the mind. You find this only in a few places of the suttas, but sometimes the Satipatthana itself is called a kind of samadhi. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? How that is the case. And of course, what it means, it shows you the close connection between these things. And when we, earlier on, we looked at the classification of right effort, right mindfulness, and right stillness, we saw that these three were connected together as an aspect of samadhi. Yeah? These are grouped together as samadhi in the suttas. And this is what you're seeing here as well. So when this stillness is developed, then you should develop it further. And with the movement of the mind, without the movement of the mind, rapture, bliss, and equanimity, this is just a shorthand or a different way of talking about the 4 jhanas, or the 5 jhanas in this case, because there is like a 1.5 jhana between the first and the second. So it shows you Satipatthana can be considered a samadhi, and then how that leads you on to the full samadhi of the jhanas. Venables, you should meditate observing an aspect of the body, feeling, mind, mental qualities, keen, aware, at one with minds that are clear, stilled, and unified, so as to truly know the body. Yeah, so here we are talking about, again, we're talking about obviously Satipatthana practice. You can recognize the formula there. If you take out the green stuff, but you just look at the white part in the beginning, it's all Satipatthana formula. Yeah, so you practice Satipatthana, but you practice it with a mind that is clear, stilled, and unified. These are terms that refer to samadhi again. So how do we understand that? Well, we can understand it as a Satipatthana, where the mind is very strongly established in Satipatthana, either something you do before jhana or something you do after jhana, but the mind is very pure. It's a kind of advanced form of Satipatthana. And then that will lead you to seeing, knowing the body as it truly is. So in other words, again, it leads to this idea of Yatabhut Anandadasana. So here, an interesting thing starts to emerge. Yeah, you can see what is emerging here is that you have the Samma Sati leading on to Samma Samadhi, or being very closely related even to Samma Samadhi, and that again going to knowing the body as it really is, which is Samma Jnana. Yeah, if you know the tenfold path, instead of the eightfold path, after Samma Samadhi, you have Samma Jnana. And this is exactly what you see here. The knowing the body as it actually is, that is an aspect of right knowledge. And then another Satipatthana, and this is one of the favorites with Ajahn Brahmali, he often quotes this one. There is no absorption for one without wisdom. There is no wisdom for one without absorption. Absorption here is jhana. But one with absorption and wisdom, they are truly close to extinguishment. Extinguishment being a translation of nibbana. Yeah, absorption and wisdom going together, vipassana and samatha going together in the deepest sense. You cannot have one without the other. They're always related to each other. So, okay, so one more sutta. This is a sutta that someone mentioned last time. This is called the Bhikkhunupassayang Sutta. This is the Bhikkhuni quarters, quarters of the nuns. And this gives an example of how to use samatha and vipassana together. So as they meditate, observing an aspect of the body, so this is Satipatthana practice, while you do that, there arises in that person physical tension, mental sluggishness, or the mind is externally scattered. So these are defilements arising. Sluggishness is like tiredness of the mind. Externally scattered means that you have for some reason the mind goes outside. It becomes scattered. It becomes kind of desires or ill will or whatever is happening in the mind, and perhaps in a very small extent. So what do you do if you are observing the body and this happens? Well, what you do is this. That monastic should direct their mind towards an inspiring foundation, or perhaps an inspiring object, if you like. Yeah? As they do so, joy springs up. So an inspiring foundation or an inspiring object, what is that? An inspiring object here is anything which allows your mind to give up those defilements of the mind, brings back mindfulness, brings up joy, brings up all of these positive qualities. So these are things like the anusatis. You find the anusatis, the 6 recollections. These are the kind of things that kind of bring inspiration back to the mind. These are inspirational objects. And then when you use that inspirational object, it can also be the breath, because the breath will calm you down and will inspire you and bring you back on track again. And then when you do that, then you have the standard sequence of dependent liberation coming about, or you can call it the awakening factors growing. So as you do that, the joy comes back. When you become joyful, the rapture springs up. When the mind has rapture, the body becomes tranquil. When the body is tranquil, you feel bliss. When you have blissful, the mind becomes still. You acquire samadhi. So you start off with Satipatthana, and then when the Satipatthana doesn't really work anymore, then you use the samadhi, bring the mind to Samma Samadhi, and then when the mind is still, you can then return to Satipatthana again if you want. Satipatthana and samadhi going together, and you can see here how they kind of almost alternate, again, going together in a certain way. So then they reflect, I have accomplished the goal which I directed my mind. And in other words, you have attained samadhi, then you can contemplate again as you did before. So the point of all of this is that, first of all, to understand that samatha and vipassana go together. At the deeper stages, this manifests in satipatthana and samadhi, becoming very closely intertwined. As the satipatthana becomes profound, the right mindfulness, samadhi is just around the corner. They become almost indistinguishable from each other when it becomes very profound. But then you can take it one step further, and that is when you have the connection between satipatthana and deep insight. Because this is one thing we haven't talked about yet. What we have talked about so far is samatha vipassana in a more preliminary way, yeah? How to give rise to these things. And the very last thing we want to talk about is satipatthana and deep insight itself. But let's take a short break before we do that, so we don't kind of overload too much. Let's take 5 minutes meditation together. Okay, I'm just going to carry on, and maybe we have time towards the end. We can do the last questions at the very end after I have gone through the last part here. It shouldn't take that much longer. So now we want to talk about Samma Sati, Satipatthana, and deep insight, the real panya, the real wisdom of the path. And so, which is kind of interesting. We have been saying so far that Satipatthana leads to samadhi, but in a number of places you also see that Satipatthana leads to the very end of the path as well. So it must also go beyond samadhi. And this is kind of interesting here. The main purpose of Satipatthana is clearly to take us to samadhi. That's why you have Sammasati leading to Sammasamadhi, but there's more to it. As always, things are always a bit more complicated than meets the eye here. So, this is what you find in the Satipatthana Sutta itself. It says the 4 applications of mindfulness, the Satipatthana, is the path to purify sentient beings, to get them past sorrow and crying, to make an end of pain and sadness, to end the cycle of suffering, and to make them realize extinguishment. So here we are obviously talking about deep insight. The end of the cycle of suffering is really the end of the whole path of Buddhist practice. So there is 2 ways you can understand this statement. One way is to understand that this is part of that path leading to there, not necessarily the full path. And that is how it is used elsewhere. It is said elsewhere that many aspects of the path are explained in the same way, but clearly they are not sufficient in themselves to lead to the very end of the path. So this can be understood to mean simply that these practices must lead to this, are necessary to go to the end of the path. Or it can be understood to mean that Satipatthana actually takes you to the very end in its own right. And I think in this case, the latter understanding is actually correct. Satipatthana takes you all the way to the end of the path. Look at a couple of examples of that. With a mind well developed in the 4 applications of mindfulness, seeing their limits and fully fathoming their meaning, a monastic makes an end of suffering in this very life. So if you develop these things well, fully, you actually make an end of suffering in this life. This is one among many examples that show Satipatthana going to the very end of the path. So this exposition of Satipatthana, that it leads to the very end of the path, is not all that common. You find it in the Satipatthana Suttas and a few other suttas. The main exposition of Satipatthana is always that it leads to Samma Samadhi. Some of them talk about going all the way to the end of the path. So what then is it about the Satipatthana Suttas that make them different? Why do these suttas talk about Satipatthana going all the way to the end of the path? And it is that they do not just show the path to stillness, but also the attainment and contemplation of that stillness. In other words, in the Satipatthana Sutta, it shows you how you practice to reach samadhi. And then once you reach samadhi, it shows you how to contemplate that samadhi to take it even further. I don't know if you can remember, I showed you last time that when the Satipatthana Sutta talks about the contemplation of feeling and the contemplation of mind, it talks specifically about mental states that are only attained when you have samadhi. Niramisa Sukha, the happiness, spiritual happiness, the Mahagata Chitta, the great mind, the large mind or the expansive mind, the Vimutta Chitta, the mind which is liberated. All of these things point to experiences that have to do with samadhi. So in other words, you use the samadhi experience itself as a contemplation object to take you even further and then taking you all the way to the end of the path. Usually Satipatthana stops at Samma Samadhi, but sometimes it is expanded in this way to include the contemplation of Samadhi itself. That's why you have two different aspects, if you like, of Satipatthana on the path. So Satipatthana practice on both sides of Samadhi is one way of thinking about it. Yeah. So for that reason, when we have the tenfold path, which is found in a place like the Anguttara Nikaya 10s, 103, right mindfulness, sammasati or satipatthana, leading to right stillness, sammasamadhi. Sammasamadhi in turn leads to right knowledge and right liberation. So right knowledge is usually called samma jnana, but you can argue that that is also an aspect of satipatthana. It's a satipatthana that happens after samadhi experiences, right? So satipatthana, in this way, you can see it happening before samadhi and also partially after samadhi. And that is how you can distinguish between why satipatthana, on the one hand, leads to stillness, but on the other hand, also leads all the way to liberation itself. Two different aspects of satipatthana. Of these, the first one is far more important. The right mindfulness that leads to stillness, that is the one that really matters. That is the one you see in the suttas again and again. The one that leads to right knowledge at the end is actually far less important. And the reason is because once you get to this point, the path is all very, very automatic. It happens almost by itself. It is the path leading up to samadhi, which is the hard part, where we have to abandon all the defilements and understand the mind in the right way. Okay, so I'm going to summarize many of the things that we have talked about, because it's quite a number of issues, and hopefully draw this together in a way which makes a little bit of sense, so that we can have a better idea of this whole subject of samatha and vipassana. So the first thing to understand, which I mentioned before, is that vipassana is not a process but a result. And because it is not a process, it means is it not really a meditation. Yeah? It is the outcome of meditation. Or it can be the outcome of reflection. I showed you the perceptions that you can develop before, and these perceptions also can develop vipassana. If you do those reflections in the right way, the perceptions in the right way, clear seeing will be the outcome of those reflections. So it is a result of the practice. And again, it means that the idea of vipassana meditation can be misleading if we understand that in the wrong way. According to the suttas, there isn't any vipassana meditation, there's just meditation. The outcome is vipassana. Vipassana and samatha are the result of reducing the hindrances, And because they are the result of the same process, they must develop together. They must come together and arise together. Vipassana, what it actually means, is it understanding the nature of phenomena, which basically means understanding ourselves in terms of the three characteristics. Not 5 characteristics, but 3 characteristics. I get fired by Ajahn Brahmali if I get that basic thing wrong. It would be embarrassing to get fired as a monk, wouldn't it? You are fired from the monastery. Ding, the apprentice. So that's what basically vipassana is about, seeing things in terms of the 3 characteristics, the tilakkhana. So we have an understanding of the idea of vipassana. This is what clear seeing refers to, clear seeing in this area. The most direct way of achieving this is through reflection, which in the suttas is called development of perception. So if you want to kind of develop vipassana more directly, then you do these kind of reflection exercises, and then the calm comes along with that. If you want to do it the other way, then you focus on the calming side of things, and the vipassana comes along as you calm things, as in developing the mindfulness of breathing here. Then is the interesting point, is that the idea that, the contemporary vipassana meditation technique, such as watching the changing nature of feeling, there actually is not all that much evidence for that in the suttas. The the reason why they teach this kind of why they give this kind of teaching comes from the second aspect of the Satipatthana Sutta. The second aspect is the Vedana Nupassana, the contemplation of feelings, and then they kind of they take it from the contemplation of feelings, that you just sit down and you watch the feelings in the body as they are here and now, watch the feelings come, watch the feelings disappear, arising, disappearing, and it is a particular interpretation of the Vedana Nupassana, the contemplation of feeling section in the Satipatthana Sutta. But actually, if you look at the way the Buddha explains Vedana Nupassana, contemplation of feeling, the only place you find that contemplation of feelings is in the Anapanasati Sutta. So the Buddha talks about contemplation of feeling. It is always in the connection with Anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing. And there it is explained very clearly. You watch the joy and happiness arising in connection with the mindfulness of the breathing itself. So if you're going to follow the suttas, really, that is how the contemplation of feelings is done. And the idea that things arising in the body and kind of disappearing in the body, in the moment, that is the way to do it, or in the present, is not. There isn't any strong evidence for that. So it may not be wrong. You can maybe do that. It may give good results. And if it gives good results, great. But it is not kind of the foremost way that is explained in the suttas. And the way I like to do things, if I can, I like to follow as close to the suttas as I can. That is my preferred way, because then I feel I'm on safer ground on getting the whole path right, rather than doing something which is a little bit on the side and which may work, but maybe it won't work quite as well as the way the Buddha is talking about it. And that's why I would prefer always to come back to the idea of mindfulness of breathing rather than doing these other techniques. So that is kind of the modern Vipassana idea. And one of the very important points here is precisely this idea: how do we know that we are making progress in meditation? This is a very important point, right? Because we need to monitor our progress. We need to find out if you are going to watch the feelings in the body, is it working for you? Are you really having success? If you're doing mindfulness of breathing, is it working? How do we know? And one of the things that we can know usually is whether we feel more peaceful, because peace is something that is kind of very tangible. You know whether you're peaceful or not. You know whether you have a degree of clarity or not. These things are quite tangible. And when I say peace, I don't mean kind of tired peace. I mean clear peace, where you are alert and peaceful at the same time. So if you are going to measure your Vipassana meditation, don't measure it in terms of your insight, because insight is very, very difficult to measure. It's very difficult, very easy to be deluded about your insight. If you have real insight, as we have seen today, you will also have calm. So the way to measure whether your insight is working is to see whether you have become more peaceful. That is how you know. So if you do Vipassana meditation, such as watching the nature of feeling arising and passing away, the way that you know that it is working for you is to see at the end whether it leads to real calm or not, real peace. Because peace is very tangible. It is something that you can measure, something you can know, whereas the idea of insight is much more difficult to really ascertain. And because they grow together, you know that if you have real insight, you will be calm also. That's kind of neat, isn't it? So you have a way of kind of knowing whether you are moving in the right direction or not. Because Samatha and Vipassana develop together, you can measure your success in Vipassana by how much Samatha, by how much calm you have. This is one of the outcomes of this way of thinking. Samatha Vipassana always coming together here. And then the very last point, which I mentioned before, is that Satipatthana, or Samma Sati, if you like, especially Satipatthana, you have it before Samadhi and after Samadhi. And the purpose of the two is slightly different. The Satipatthana that we do before samadhi is really there to help us overcome the 5 hindrances so that we can attain samma samadhi. Yeah? It is to help us on the path to samadhi, to the very last factor of the path. And then after samma samadhi, after you have achieved real stillness, then the purpose of Satipatthana becomes to see things according to reality, and that's where you can have real, profound insights. This is useful to remember that distinction because it kind of guides you as to what you should be looking for. You don't really need to look for deep insights until you've had real samadhi. The main purpose then is to overcome the hindrances. Then overcome the hindrances, attain samadhi, then you can have the deep insights on the path. Okay, so Jeepers Creepers, the end. Yay! So I don't know what to say. I reached the end. Okay, good. So there's a lot there, and I hope I haven't lost you completely. I'm sure you will have learned something from this. But please, if there are any last questions or last whatever, please go ahead. Venerable Vimutti, you go first. Yeah.
Can you go back about 4 slides, please? Ajahn?
4 slides, okay.
Roughly,
see. Yeah.
I think.
1, 2, 3, 4.
No, before that. Oh dear.
What was it about?
It was. I think we've gone too far back. It was something to do with there was a phrase I was going to ask about. Some inspiring foundation.
Okay, yeah, I know what that is. Okay, just hold on.
Oh, there.
Was that
go
the
back
one?
Go back one, or forward, or whatever it was. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, there you are. Okay, yeah.
So
Yep.
I had 2 questions about that sentence, that monastics should direct their mind towards an inspiring foundation.
Mm.
The first question is, the word foundation, is it the same as the part of Satipatthana that can be translated as foundation? Because I remember the 4 Satipatthanas used to be translated as the 4 foundations of mindfulness.
Yeah, no, it's a completely different word.
Can you please explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so in Satipatthana is, I actually talked about this at the very first course we did. Satipatthana is a compound made up of sati and upatthana. And upatthana is the word that is translated as a foundation in that case. And it is not really a good translation because Satipatthana has to do with how you apply the mindfulness rather than to do with building up mindfulness. If you translate it as a foundation of mindfulness, it sounds as if you use it to make more mindfulness. Yeah? It's a foundation for how to create mindfulness. But that's not really what it means. You have to, first of all, give rise to mindfulness, then you apply that mindfulness to the 4 objects, the 4 areas, body, feelings, mind, and mental phenomena, and then you develop the path further in that way. But you're not actually developing mindfulness, you're using mindfulness. Here, the word foundation is nimitta, I think. Yeah, I think so. This because nimitta means, in this kind of context, it means a basis for inspiration. A basis, a foundation for inspiration. And for example, in the I think this is Advaita Sudarta's translation. I think it's a good translation actually. And in the Chula Vedalla Sutta, you find that where it talks about the 4 foundations of mindfulness are the nimitta of samadhi. Yeah. So they are the nimitta in a sense of you can say they are the objects of samadhi because you focus on these 4 areas, and as you do so, samadhi comes. Yeah. But the word object is often not ideal because they're not really object as such. They're more like areas that you focus on, yeah? And that's why he used the idea here of foundation or basis for samadhi.
I guess I'm thinking also in the context of that whole paragraph, it's talking about physical tension, mental sluggishness, a mind that's externally scattered. So it's not a mind that you would associate with a nimittas around the corner, or samadhi just imminent, or anything like that. So I'm wondering how the inspiring foundation is used there. It must be something quite specific and maybe even personal, like to each individual.
Yeah,
like some kind of bridge or stepping stone to move away from that kind of mind state.
Exactly. But I don't think it's a very strong mindset. Remember that the idea here is that you probably already have a very pure mind. So this is a person who is practicing samadhi, and a little bit of defilements arise. It's not the kind of, I don't think it's a very strong kind of defilements you're talking about here. So you need to re-establish the mind again. So anything that you find inspiring in your practice, that kind of brings back the joy, brings back the happiness, the stability of mind, re-establishes the mindfulness, would then be suitable in that kind of context. So whatever, but usually it's the standard things, Buddhanusati, Silanusati, Chaganusati, Anapanasati, Metta meditation, Karuna, something like that.
Also, where it says should direct their mind,
yeah,
I'm guessing that's not a very active direction then? Particularly if it's already just mild forms of hindrances?
Yeah, a very gentle direction of the mind is probably correct, very sort of gently, just kind of tick, kind of suggestion of the mind. Not forceful, indeed, if you hold on 1 second, I'll just bring up the sutta right here.
Okay, thank you.
This is the nice thing. So here we are, Bhikkhunu here. So, inspiring foundation, Pasadaniya, nimitta. Nimitta, is the idea of a samadhi, same word. Chittang, panidahita bang. And panidahita means basically means to direct. So you have directed and undirected meditation. This is where you actually turn your mind in a certain direction, like you're watching the breath, for example.
So it sort of implies that it's not something that you can bring up straight away. It's something that you have to direct your mind. Seems to imply you have to. There's an interval. You're mentally sluggish.
Yeah.
And so there's an interval of time, perhaps, where you give your mind a chance.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Will take however much time it takes. You just have to wait. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll walk there. During meditation sessions, we are asked to look at our own mind, how peaceful we had been towards the last 5 minutes. That is, I suppose, this last reflection that you talked today.
Yeah.
Is that why? The reflection on the sanya. You gave 3 occasions where you can use during anapanasati meditation. You told us that we can use reflections on the body if you feel sluggish, etc. And then said at the end to reflect on how the meditation went.
Yeah.
Is that why we do this reflection at the end of a normal meditation session?
Right.
This was...
Where was it again? This one here, is that one you meant? The one you meant?
Correct.
Yeah?
Yeah.
It's a little bit different. This one here is more like just knowing what is the right contemplation to use. When to use contemplation, different times when reflection is good to use. So you use your, if you find that there is a blockage in your meditation practice, and you can find that out at the end of the meditation. You think, wait a minute, I'm getting blocked, I'm stopping at this time every time. And then that is the initial contemplation that you do after meditation. But then you think, well, how can I overcome this block? And then you realize, well, actually, maybe I need to reflect a little bit on the impermanence of worldly phenomena. I need to reflect a bit about the problems of the world, so I can let go a little bit more. And then through that reflection, you come back to the breath meditation later on. And then you try again, and then you find that that blockage may have been removed. So the idea of reflecting at the end of the meditation is actually to understand the process of meditation. And you will see that at the end you feel, okay, today I'm more peaceful at the end than I start at the beginning. Why was that? And you will see the reason was because I let go more, I just allowed things to be. I had the perception in the mind that these worldly phenomena are not interesting, and that's why it was easy for me to follow the breath. And you will start to see that there are certain perceptions in your mind that enable you to follow the breath. And then you see when your meditation doesn't work, and you will see that there are certain perceptions in your mind that stop you from being able to watch the breath. Yeah? That's what I mean by coming at the end of the meditation. You just think, well, why? How come my meditation was so good today? And you reflect, you look at the qualities of your mind that were present at the beginning, and you can see the connection between those qualities of mind and how your meditation is progressing. Why does it work? Why does it not work?
Okay. Thank you, Ajahn. Then one of the ladies here asked on the second day or the first day, Ekayana Maggo, is it something related to the second stage Anapanasati, that is the only way to Nibbana, basically? Is that the post-Samadhi?
We're going to discuss Ekayana Maggo later on at length, but this is going to be the second part of the Satipatthana workshop. This is only the first part, the first 4. The second 4, we're going to discuss Ekayana Maggo. So don't hang in there, Prem, and we will get back to those things. But it's a very interesting phrase, and it is, if you read, Ajahn Sujato wrote his famous book, The History of Mindfulness. He writes 10 pages on this particular phrase and what it actually means. So I'm going to condense that into one paragraph for you, and I'm going to tell you what it may mean and what it may not mean. The commentary gives about 5 or 6 different interpretations of Ekayana Maggo. So we're going to kind of make it, condense it a little bit.
Ajahn, we shouldn't say too much about what's coming so that they will come back.
That's exactly that's my point.
Yeah?
This is selling
Okay.
things.
That's enough.
Yeah.
Just before we end, the slides, I think the people online are asking for the slides are actually posted on the website. If you go to our BSWA website, go to news, and then the first news that you will see is Satipatthana workshop, reading materials and slides. So the slides have been uploaded every week. And then this one as well, it will go up once I get it.
Yeah. Okay, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm very glad you're here. It will be very lonely without you, so it's good to have you here. And just to give you a heads up for next time we're going to talk about the Satipatthana Sutta itself, and we're going to try to find out what the original Satipatthana Sutta may have looked like. One of the interesting things is that, through modern scholarship, you have shown that the Satipatthana Sutta, as we have it now, is very unlikely to have been the sutta that the Buddha taught. There has been accretions and additions to the sutta over history. So we're going to come back to the original, the pure, the pristine Satipatthana Sutta. That's what's happening next time. So please, if that sounds interesting, please come back next time. In the meantime, let's just pay respect to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha.